when it comes to adopting emerging technologies, my advice would be do not do it for the sake of doing it. I always say it's not the pixie dust that I can sprinkle around, right? So you always start with the what business problem are you trying to solve? And is this the right technology? I hear that in blockchain a lot. People are like, let's do a blockchain project. And I'm like, hey, wait a second. What problem are you trying to solve? And is blockchain the correct technology for you to solve the problem? Maybe you don't need blockchain unless there are some attributes of blockchain, which is immutability, that you need for this use case, right?
So, hello and welcome to the brand new episode of Engatica's interview series. I'm your host, Samarth, and we are really glad to have you join with us today. And today we have Swathi Young, CTO at SustainChain on the show. Welcome, Swathi.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. The Engatica interview series is a powerhouse of insights from industry experts and influencers from around the world. A platform that provides the latest news on AI, automation, and technologies that will help you grow your business. Come, be a part of our community, learn, share, and grow with us. So, Swati, I have a couple of questions for you. So, let's begin.
Sure.
In a simple analogy, how should we approach combining emerging technologies? And how do we even go about thinking of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially, a lot of what I do is that finding use cases for emerging technologies, but most importantly, mapping it to the goals of any organization. The organization could be a commercial organization, it could be a government agency, it could be a nonprofit, but essentially, the goal of utilizing any emerging technologies is to first find out how that emerging technology can solve a business problem, number one. And number two, how can it support the business goals? So, for example, you're talking about Shopify, it's a retail customer. So, if their goal for the next quarter is attrition, basically making sure they don't lose customers and they actually increase customer lifetime value, one of the things to think about emerging technologies like machine learning, predictive analytics, artificial intelligence, and this whole umbrella term AI, but it's essentially a lot of use cases of machine learning. They can think about, okay, if my next quarter goal is to retain customers, they use machine learning to analyze all their customers and see who are the customers that are consistently purchasing, repeat customers, and also high dollar value, and maybe send them promotional material, emails. It could be marketing material or blogs. It could be incentives like promotional items or coupons. So essentially, it all boils down to first understand what are some business goals, and then how can emerging technologies help you. So some use cases to think about when using machine learning or artificial intelligence is, one, you can do predictive analytics. What is possible in the future based on my history, right? So if I have bought for you certain types of clothes, for example, you can forecast in the future I might like similar things and suggest that. Amazon does a great job of that. So that's predictive analytics, of using it for forecasting. You can also use to forecast maintenance of any equipment that you have, like HVAC and others. And secondly, you can use it as a recommendation engine. So you think of LinkedIn. We all know LinkedIn will always give you suggestions. Connect with this person or that person, right? Because based on your historical patterns, it's a lot of attributes. It's not just your history of transactional, what you did on LinkedIn. It could be what is your current role and mapping it to similar roles or associate roles. So that's a recommendation engine. And similarly, if you're talking about Shopify customers, they can say, hey, we have this new item, and based on they usually buy, like, say, red color clothes. There is a new dress that's red color, and you're making a recommendation, hey, we think you will like it. So that's recommendation. Third is natural language processing. We were just talking about chatbots. But there are other use cases of natural language processing, which is text analysis, sentiment analysis. So if they have a new product, say they have a new burger, and they want to understand, it's only released in limited cities like in Bangalore or Delhi, and they want to understand the sentiments from the public, whether this burger is liked by the public or not. So they can actually collect all the social media data about the burger. It can be Twitter, it can be Snapchat, it can be other things like Facebook and everything, and curate all the social media data and use natural language processing, which is another subdivision of artificial intelligence, to analyze what people are saying about this burger. Are they saying, oh, it's hit the spot, or are they saying like it's not up to mark? So based on that, they can actually decide whether to fully release the burger in all the cities or not. So that's another use case, which is basically using natural language processing. We already spoke about chatbot you can use for service agent. And the fourth one I want to say is integration of emerging technologies between platforms. Like, for example, I see a lot of use cases of emerging technologies like Internet of Things that integrates with artificial intelligence. So essentially, Internet of Things is a technology that uses sensors. So you can think of it like putting sensors in a huge office building, and the sensors can detect whether there are people in the building or not. And then you can connect the sensor detection to whether the lights are automatically switched off or switched on, and you can save electricity, etc. But essentially, combine that technology to artificial intelligence and machine learning. So take all the sensor data. Suppose you have multiple sensors in a 10-floor building, and take the sensor data for over a month and analyze patterns, right? So essentially, if you analyzed over a month of the building, and you said, okay, most Saturdays there are people in there, and Sundays there's no one there, and how can we better manage this, right? And there's another thing, you can actually use it for security purposes as well. So your sensors will detect whether our intruders are coming in or things like that. So I call that the emergence of an integration of technology. So in this case, we're using IoT and sensor technology to integrate with artificial intelligence and machine learning. And there are some interesting use cases where blockchain also integrates with AI as well. So those are some of the use cases that businesses can think about when it comes to emerging technologies.
Oh, wonderful answer. It was really insightful. I have a follow-up question. So, how can you scale your existing IT infrastructure, considering that you still use legacy systems along with the new and emerging technologies?
Yeah, that is like a question that I'm often asked even by the C-suite executives, right? So there are two approaches, top down and bottoms up. Top down is you start with a use case, a simple use case, which is like a quick win, 3-month prototype proof of concept of your emerging technologies, say machine learning. So that doesn't require huge investments of infrastructure, etc. You can do it like, you can even do like on your desktop, but any machine learning will need a lot of data. So I would suggest, if you already have data center or AWS, you can leverage that for compute, and still use your open source tools like R or Python. Typically, Python is what I have seen and led all my teams. So you start with that, and you do a quick win to see if it helps businesses. What do business thinks about it? And then if they think that they want to scale, then you invest in the infrastructure. So that is a top down approach. Now, bottoms up approach is that you take an assessment of all your infrastructure, and this is one of the things I have done, is develop a framework called AI Playbook for the US government. I co-authored it as a volunteer effort, and in that we do a lot of emphasis on the assessment phase, where you're doing assessment of all your infrastructure, existing infrastructure, and thinking if you have to scale your data needs. And I'm talking about data in the context of emerging technologies such as machine learning. If you're thinking of blockchain, you might need different technologies. But essentially, you take like assessment of what your current infrastructure is, and also have a roadmap of where you want to go, and then step by step you scale. But that approach of bottoms up will require more investment, right? which which is helpful for large organizations if they already have multiple use cases across the board. So as I have seen, like big pharmaceutical companies are already using machine learning across different divisions like clinical trials, research, etc., etc. So it makes sense for them to take a look of the bottoms up approach to scale across the organization. But most mid and smaller scale organizations start with the top down, because that is less risk, less investments needed. Excuse me one second. So so legacy systems is always a problem. So essentially you want to align it with what is the risk tolerance level, etc.
All right. Yeah. Uh, sure. Moving on. That was a wonderful answer, and that's true. So we should always keep track of the current resources which we have, and depending on that, we should, invest in the other things, like the advanced things. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Right, and especially when you're talking of machine learning, I always recommend using open source tools, R Python. Like I said, even for chatbot, we use Google Dialogflow. Of course, if you want security, it's a cost, but it's pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
So it's pretty robust.
Yeah. True. True. So how is responsible AI different from ethical AI, and do people know the difference?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it is almost analogous. Some context people use responsible AI, some people use ethical AI. I think in my mind, it's synonymous. So essentially, whether you're talking about responsible AI or ethical AI design, you're considering factors like bias, fairness, responsibility, data provenance, etc. So essentially, the terminology doesn't matter as much as what you're thinking about it, right? So again, I co-authored, and I'll put it in the chat, the ethical AI framework for the US government that I co-authored. Mm. And basically, you will you will have to incorporate multiple aspects of responsible or ethical AI in your design when you're implementing a machine learning or artificial intelligence application. So, for example, we all know about data, and data can be biased and so on, right? So I'll talk about like one, two, three, four, and five: bias, fairness, transparency, responsibility, and interpretation, right? So essentially, why bias? Because machine learning uses large quantities of data to learn from, and data is very human. Humans are creating data, so and humans are biased, so the data also will have a bias component in it. So for example, if you take certain demographic of the population, say historically, if you talk about recruitment algorithm, right? So historically, women have not got promotions, and if you build your algorithm on top of that, it could be biased against women. So bias is an important component to consider, and there are technical ways of dealing with it and non-technical ways. Like technical ways, there are what if frameworks, etc., to determine what is the quantity of bias or the skewness of the bias. And then non-technical, or obviously you make sure you collect enough information from all demographics of the population, and make sure you're actually balancing the data set. Next, it comes to fairness, right? Fairness is essentially, how can you give equal opportunity to everybody? So you want to make sure the outputs of the algorithm are actually tested for various what if scenarios, to make sure that it's, again, fairness and bias goes hand in hand, because fairness can maybe omit somebody out of its output. transparency and interpretation go hand in hand. So when you talk about machine learning, especially to C-suite and business leaders or CEOs, they always think about machine learning or AI. Oh, it is a black box. I don't even know what's going on inside. So one of the newer areas of research and more technical components that have been realized as part of transparency and interpretation is the making sure that your algorithm is not a black box, and how somebody can interpret the results. And the results could be interpreted by not necessarily the math behind the algorithm, but what is the weightage of the parameters that are used to drive the outcome of the algorithm. And then responsibility. Obviously, you want to make sure, especially in things like criminal justice and other things, and even things like fraud detection or issuing a credit card or a business loan, you want to make sure you're designing it in a responsible manner. So when it comes to whether you're giving the phrase ethical AI or responsible AI, it's important to consider all these five components.
Amazing. Yeah. So you spoke about five components of machine learning and also the uses of it. That's very great. Yeah.
Yeah, the ethical AI considerations. I actually put it in the chat, the ethical AI framework that I had co-authored for the US government.
Good. Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Moving on. So why do we have to talk so much about humanizing AI, and why is there so much friction in adopting artificial intelligence?
Yeah, both are very different questions, right? Why is it important to humanize AI? Is because we want to create an equitable society. We don't want some people to benefit more than the others, or like I said in the previous question, we don't want the algorithms to be biased against, say, if an algorithm is used to issue a credit card or a business loan, and women are not getting it because the algorithm said this person is likely to default, don't give her a credit card, and more women are getting rejected and more men are getting approved, it's creating an unequitable society. And so it is very important that we humanize, so that our goal is to create a welfare state where everyone is treated equal. So that is humanizing in the short term, but in the long term, there's debates about, it can totally replace a lot of jobs. So there's going to be job displacements at a large scale. And how would governments actually enable people if they are displaced, not only to reskill or upskill them, because there are a lot of pockets of society they might not get upskilled to do a tech job. They might be a truck driver and not get upskilled. So there's a whole societal problem that we have to think, and many futurists and governments are thinking about it, to create something like a universal basic income and so on. So that's another component of humanizing. Essentially, it again goes back to how to make sure we create an equitable society, so that there is not like a lot of disparities in society. And the
Sure. So
second part of the question was very different. You said, why is there hesitation to adopt these emerging technologies? I think a lot of it is because of nomenclature, and because of there is a lot of fear that AI will take away jobs. While it might be true 100 years from now, not at the current where we are at the levels of AI, especially the use cases of machine learning, you can use it more for the benefit of both society and organization goals rather than negative benefits. But again, like I said, I speak to a lot of executives and educate and advocate about the benefits. And I think that's the missing link. Like, AI is such a loaded term and it's very ambiguous. So people are intimidated by that. They don't understand how to realize the value of their investments. And once somebody can educate and advocate and break it down for them, I think they would embrace it.
that's correct. That's correct. So it's very important to humanize AI to keep the equality quotient, and yeah. So educating people in AI is very much important in today's world. That's true. Yeah. So, what does it take to streamline enterprise AI, and what mistakes should we avoid?
Streamlining enterprise AI is a huge undertaking. So essentially, again, when I spoke about the top down, bottoms up, I think for a large organization, if they have multiple use cases, say in marketing and product and finance and everything, then it makes sense to streamline enterprise AI. And when you talk about streamlining enterprise AI, there are three components of it. One is infrastructure. Think of it as the engine on top of which your AI will be built. So infrastructure could be your AWS, your open source tools, your data visualizations tools. All these tools and platforms will be your infrastructure. Your next layer is actually data, which is the underlining they say data is the new oil, which is the underlining factor for any machine learning in any machine learning problem. So data, when it comes to data, it's not just the infrastructure. You need data governance, data provenance, data traceability, all the thing aspects of data that you need to have in place so that your outcomes will depend on data, and your data's quality is not good, you will get like garbage in, garbage out. So data is very important, and not just what you're doing with tools, but what are your policies about data governance. Every time data changes at the origin, which is the data provenance, how will it be tracked throughout the transaction? And every time data changes through a data model in your database, how is it progressed to your data warehouse? And every time a new data field is introduced, how is it impacting your machine learning and production? So there's so much about data governance and policy that should be in place. So that's the second layer. And the third layer is obviously the machine learning algorithms, the data analysis, and all feature engineering, and finally the algorithms. And finally, when they are in production, how do you monitor them and make sure that there is no data drift or algorithm drift that happens? So I'm oversimplifying it, but those are the three layers. It's a huge undertaking.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. It's a very huge thing, and it's good that you kept it very short and explained in a very nice way. That's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I'm done with all my questions. Are there any other sound bites which you would like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, so when it comes to adopting emerging technologies, my advice would be do not you do it for the sake of doing it. I always say it's not the pixie dust that I can sprinkle around, right? So you always start with the what business problem are you trying to solve? And is this the right technology? I hear that in blockchain a lot. People are like, let's do a blockchain project. And I'm like, hey, wait a second. What problem are you trying to solve? And is blockchain the correct technology for you to solve the problem? Maybe you don't need blockchain unless there are some attributes of blockchain, which is immutability, that you need for this use case, right? So my advice is don't do emerging technologies for the sake of doing it. Find a good business case, align it to your business goals, and then implement a use case that makes sense for your organization.
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights with us. For more content, subscribe to Engati and tap a bell icon to get access to exclusive content from thought leaders from around the globe. Thank you for joining us, and we will
For
join
having
you.
me. It
Yeah,
was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
sure. Thank you so much, and we will see you with the new expert soon. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Bye.